It was supposed to be a good day, a perfect day. Malik Johnson had spent weeks planning for this moment. For months he had worked extra shifts at the diner, wiping down sticky counters, refilling coffee cups, and smiling through rude customers, all for this. His little sister, Lena, was turning 10, and for the first time in his life, he could finally afford to buy her something special. Not just any birthday present, a real gift, something she would cherish. A silver charm bracelet. He had passed Hartman's fine jewelry more times than he could count, staring through the glass window at the delicate bracelet on display. Tiny charms dangled from it. A heart, a star, a little book, because Lena loved to read. It was perfect. And today, after all his hard work, it was finally his. The afternoon sun bathed the streets of Riverton in a golden glow, making everything feel warm, safe, peaceful. Families strolled down the sidewalk, children laughed as they ran ahead of their parents, and an elderly couple sat on a nearby bench, sharing an ice cream cone. It was the kind of day where nothing should go wrong. Malik adjusted his hoodie as he neared the store, unzipping it slightly to reveal the neat polo shirt underneath. He had dressed carefully that morning, making sure he looked presentable. His mom always told him, "Be mindful of how you look, Malik. Not for you, for them, so they don't assume." He hated that she had to say that. Still, he ran a hand over his hoodie, hesitating for just a moment before pulling open the heavy glass door. A soft chime rang as he stepped inside. The air was cooler here, crisp with the scent of expensive cologne and freshly polished wood. Light reflected off the glass cases where rows of gleaming rings, necklaces, and watches sat on velvet cushions, untouched and perfect. The store was quiet, except for the occasional murmur of customers admiring the jewelry. Malik spotted the bracelet immediately. It was even better up close. His fingers twitched with anticipation as he took a step toward the counter. And that's when he felt it, that shift, that change in the air. It was subtle, but he knew it well, the weight of eyes on him. Behind the glass counter stood Karen Whitmore, middle-aged, blonde hair styled into careful waves, a crisp white blouse tucked neatly into an expensive pencil skirt. She had the look of someone who didn't miss a single detail, whose entire life revolved around control. And right now, she was watching him. Her expression wasn't overtly hostile. It was quieter than that, more calculated, the slight furrow in her brow, the way her fingers tightened around the edge of the counter, the slow, almost imperceptible shift of her posture. Malik had seen this before. It was the kind of look that said, "What are you doing here?" The kind of look that made it clear he wasn't supposed to belong. His stomach tightened, but he didn't let it show. Instead, he straightened his back, kept his shoulders relaxed, and approached the counter with a polite, easy smile. He pointed at the bracelet. "I'd like to see that one, please." Karen didn't move. She just stared at him. A pause. Then, "That's a very expensive piece," she said finally. Malik kept his expression neutral. "I know," he replied, nodding. "I've been saving for it." Karen arched an eyebrow. "Really?" Her voice dripped with doubt, coated in a politeness so thin it was practically transparent. Malik reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. He flipped it open, showing the neatly folded bills inside. His hard-earned money, the money he had worked for, saved for. Karen's gaze flicked to the cash. She still didn't move. Instead, she let out a small, amused scoff, and then she said it. "That's a lot of money for someone like you." It wasn't a question. It wasn't curiosity. It was an accusation. Malik felt the blood drain from his face. The air in the store suddenly felt heavier. The weight of her words settled onto his shoulders like a lead blanket. He had heard things like this before. Maybe not in those exact words, but always the same meaning. Someone like you. Not someone hard-working, not someone responsible, not someone who had every right to be standing there, cash in hand, ready to make a purchase. Someone who didn't belong. A muscle in Malik's jaw tightened. He took a slow, measured breath, willing himself to stay calm. "I work at Riverton Diner," he said evenly. Saved up for months. Karen tilted her head slightly. Is that so? Another pause. Then, finally, she reached into the display case and pulled out the bracelet. Be careful with it, she warned, placing it on the counter. It's worth more than what you probably make in a year. Malik's fingers twitched. He swallowed hard, forcing down the anger rising in his chest. He wouldn't let her get to him. Not today. His hands were steady as he picked up the bracelet, the cool silver smooth against his fingertips. It was perfect, exactly what he had imagined. And then it slipped. A split-second mistake. His grip faltered, and the bracelet tumbled down, bouncing against the counter before landing on the tile floor. Malik froze. The room went silent. Then Karen's voice sliced through the air like a whip. Thief! A gasp from a nearby customer. Heads turned. Karen lunged for the phone. Get the police here, now! Malik's heart pounded. Wait, I didn't. Young black male, hoodie, tried to steal, aggressive. His breath came short. Number. No, no, no. This wasn't happening. The moment the words left her lips, he saw it in their eyes. The customers, the other employees, the people who had been ignoring him a second ago, now, they were staring at him like he was dangerous. A woman clutched her purse closer. A man took a step back. No one asked questions. No one doubted her. Malik's mind screamed at him to speak, to defend himself. But he knew. No one in that room was going to believe him. Then, in the distance, the sharp wail of approaching sirens. And just like that, it was too late. The sirens grew louder, a slow, rising wail cutting through the air. Malik's stomach dropped. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. He could barely breathe, his pulse hammering so hard he could hear it in his ears. His hands shook slightly at his sides, his fingers twitching as if they didn't know whether to curl into fists or stay open, defenseless. Karen had already hung up the phone, her face twisted into self-righteous satisfaction. The store had gone silent, but the air was thick. Judgment, suspicion, fear. Not his fear, theirs. They weren't scared for him, they were scared of him. A man near the watch display had taken a step back, as if Malik might lunge at him. A woman in a floral dress, someone who had barely looked up from her shopping before, was now clutching her purse so tightly her knuckles had turned white. None of them had seen what actually happened. None of them had seen the truth. But the moment Karen had yelled, the moment she had pointed her finger and cried thief, they had already made up their minds. And that's what scared him the most. It wasn't just Karen. It was all of them. The glass doors swung open with force, and the officers stormed in. Two of them. One was older, built like a linebacker, with graying hair and a jaw set in stone. His badge read Sergeant Daniels. The other was younger, his uniform still crisp, like he hadn't been on the force long. His name tag said Officer Riley. It took less than a second for Daniels to size up the situation. His gaze landed on Karen, her flustered expression, her hand still gripping the counter like she was recovering from some kind of trauma. Then his eyes locked onto Malik, and that was it. Daniel's hand was already reaching for his cuffs. Hands where I can see them. Malik's breath hitched. Wait! Now! A sharp command. Not a request, a warning. Malik's arms twitched at his sides. His brain screamed at him to comply, but his gut was tangled in something heavier. Rage, disbelief, exhaustion. I didn't steal anything, he said, forcing his voice to stay even, calm, controlled, safe. Daniels didn't care. Step away from the counter. Karen scoffed loudly, throwing her hands in the air. Are you seriously going to argue after I caught you red-handed? This is unbelievable. Malik's fingers curled. Red-handed. She said it like the truth was obvious, like she knew no one would question her. And they didn't. The customers just watched. Riley hesitated. His gaze flicked between Karen and Malik. Doubt flickered in his eyes. Daniels didn't hesitate. He took a step closer, unhooking his handcuffs. Son, I won't ask again. That's when Malik spoke the only words that mattered. "Call my mother." Daniels scoffed. "You can make your call at the station." "No," Malik said, his voice sharper now, unshakable. "Call my mother now." Karen laughed, a cold, mocking sound. "Oh, sure," she said, folding her arms. "Let's call Mommy. What's she going to do? Cry? Give a speech about injustice? Please. Who is she? A public defender? Some activist?" Malik didn't answer. He didn't need to, because outside the sound of heels clicking against the pavement was getting closer. And then the door swung open, and everything changed. A woman stepped inside, tall, powerful, unshaken. She didn't rush. She didn't look panicked. She owned the space the moment she walked in. A navy blue suit, crisp and tailored. A gold badge glinting at her waist. Eyes sharp as a blade. Her voice? Steel. "I'm Special Agent Dana Johnson," she said, flashing her badge. "FBI. And that young man you were about to arrest? He's my son." Silence. A thick, deafening silence. Daniels's entire body stiffened. Karen's face drained of color. Officer Riley blinked hard, like his brain was scrambling to process what had just happened. No one spoke. No one moved. Dana didn't break eye contact with Daniels. "Sergeant, do you have a reasonable explanation for why my son is standing here with his hands raised while you reach for your handcuffs, before even asking him a single question?" Daniels' jaw tightened. His hand dropped away from his cuffs. "We received a call about an attempted theft," he said. His voice had lost some of its edge. Riley shifted slightly, eyes darting to the security cameras overhead. Dana took a step forward. "And did you check the security footage before you decided he was guilty?" Daniels hesitated. That was all she needed. "I see." Karen snapped out of her shock, her voice suddenly shrill. "I saw him trying to steal. I called because he was about to run off with—" Dana held up a hand. Karen shut up immediately. "Let's check the cameras," Dana said. Cold, final. No one argued. The store manager, who had been too scared to intervene before, scrambled to the back to pull up the footage. Seconds later, the screen lit up. And there it was. Malik handing over his money, the bracelet slipping from his fingers, Karen shrieking like she'd caught a criminal. No theft, no pocketing, nothing. Just a kid trying to buy a gift for his sister. The silence that followed was suffocating. Daniels exhaled sharply. Riley rubbed a hand down his face. Karen looked like she wanted to disappear. Dana didn't blink. "So, Sergeant, what happens now?" Daniels didn't answer. Riley cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. "I think we're done here." Karen opened her mouth. No words came out. Dana gave a slow, knowing nod. "That's what I thought." She turned to Malik. "Come on, baby, we're leaving." Malik didn't move right away. He just stood there, looking at Karen, looking at Daniels, looking at all the people who had assumed the worst about him without a second thought. He should have felt relieved. He should have felt victorious. But all he felt was exhaustion. Because today he had won. But tomorrow it would be someone else. His mother touched his arm. "Let's go, Malik." He inhaled, exhaled, and walked out, leaving them all behind. The store was silent. Karen's face was frozen in something between shock and horror, her mouth opening slightly, but no words coming out. She had been so sure of herself, so confident in her accusation. The moment of power she had relished just minutes ago was gone, snatched away in an instant. And now she was just standing there. Malik could see the realization dawning in her eyes, the understanding that she had gone too far, that this wasn't going to be swept under the rug like she had probably expected. She glanced at Sergeant Daniels, searching for something, a lifeline, an escape, a way to justify what she had done. But he wasn't looking at her. Daniels stood stiffly, his jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. He hadn't spoken since the footage played, hadn't even glanced at Malik or Dana. He knew they had been seconds away from arresting an innocent teenager, seconds away from turning a humiliating situation into something far worse. And it wasn't because of evidence. It wasn't because of facts. It was because Karen had pointed her perfectly manicured finger at a black teenager and said, "Thief." And that had been enough. Dana folded her arms, her gaze sharp, waiting. Daniels inhaled deeply through his nose, his shoulders rising and falling. When he finally spoke, his voice was clipped, professional. "We are dismissing the allegation. No charges will be filed." The words felt hollow, like an afterthought, like he still didn't want to say them but had no choice. Malik clenched his jaw. Dana's expression didn't change. "And what about her?" she asked, tilting her head toward Karen. Karen's face twisted at the words, her hands gripping the edge of the counter as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. "Excuse me," she snapped, her voice higher-pitched now, thinner. Dana didn't blink. "You falsely accused my son of theft," she said smoothly. "You called 911 with a fabricated emergency, which is a crime. You attempted to have him detained under false pretenses. What happens to you?" Karen's breath caught. Her fingers twitched. For the first time she looked scared. And Malik knew why. Because it had been so easy for her before. Accusing him? That had come naturally. Getting the police to believe her? Effortless. But now she was the one under a microscope. Daniels shifted uncomfortably. He had probably never been asked that before, never had to answer for how quickly he had moved to arrest someone based on nothing but an accusation. Riley glanced at him. A flicker of something, hesitation, maybe even guilt, passed over his face. Malik could see it. Riley knew. He knew this wasn't right, that it never should have gone this far. But Daniels? Daniels straightened his shoulders, his face stone-cold neutral. "We'll file a report," he said stiffly. "That's all I can say." A report. Malik's stomach twisted. That was it? That was all she got? She had called the police on him, lied about him, tried to ruin his life, and all she got was a report. Dana inhaled sharply, her patience running razor-thin. "And is that report going to sit in a drawer somewhere?" she asked, her voice still cool but carrying an unmistakable weight. "Or is someone actually going to take action?" Daniel's lips pressed into a thin line. He knew she was calling him out. He also knew she outranked him. But instead of answering, he simply nodded, a curt, stiff nod. Dana exhaled through her nose, as if forcing herself to stay calm. "Fine," she said. "Then we're done here." She turned to Malik, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Let's go." Malik hesitated, his fists clenched, his body still tense, still burning from everything that had just happened. He wasn't sure what he had been expecting. An apology? An admission? Something. Anything. But Karen wasn't going to give it to him. She was still standing behind the counter, stiff and defensive, her face frozen in something that looked like anger and embarrassment tangled together. Not remorse, not shame. She wasn't sorry. She was angry that she got caught. She was angry that the person she had underestimated, the person she had assumed had no power, had turned out to be someone she never should have messed with. Malik held her gaze. And then, finally, he spoke. "I just wanted to buy a bracelet." His voice was calm, even. But the words carried everything. The frustration, the exhaustion, the weight of what had just happened. The weight of what always happened. Karen's lips parted slightly, but she said nothing, because she couldn't. She had nothing left to say. Malik turned, walking toward the door. His mother followed, her grip firm on his shoulder, steadying him. And as they stepped out of Hartman's fine jewelry, the glass door swung shut behind them. Inside, the air remained thick with everything unspoken. And Karen Whitmore, she just stood there, her world slowly crumbling around her. 3 days passed. But the world didn't move on. Not this time. By the time Malik woke up that morning, his phone was already buzzing non-stop. Messages, missed calls, news alerts stacking up on his screen like a tidal wave. Hartman's fine jewelry was everywhere. Social media had exploded with the story. The footage of what happened had leaked. Someone in the store must have recorded it. It was spreading fast. The headline was plastered across the internet like a neon warning sign. Black teen wrongfully accused of theft at high-end jewelry store. FBI chief mother shuts it down. Malik stared at the screen, scrolling through the thousands of comments. Disgusting behavior. That manager needs to be fired. She called the cops on a kid for dropping a bracelet? I hope she loses her job. This happens all the time. The only reason this kid got out of it is because his mom is powerful. Imagine all the people who don't have that protection. That one hit him like a punch to the chest. Because it was true. He hadn't gotten lucky. He had been saved. If his mother hadn't walked in, if she hadn't shut everything down in seconds, what would have happened? The thought made him feel sick. He tapped on another article, this one featuring a bold subheading, Store Manager Karen Whitmore on indefinite leave following racial profiling incident. Karen had been removed from her position. Malik didn't know if she was actually fired or if the store was just waiting for the backlash to die down before bringing her back. But for now at least, she was gone. And Daniels? An internal investigation had been launched. It turned out this wasn't his first time mishandling a situation like this. His record had complaints. People had come forward. Now, thanks to everything that had happened, the department was being forced to look into it. For the first time since that day, Malik exhaled. Justice wasn't always clean. It wasn't always quick. But this felt close. He was still staring at his phone when his little sister, Lena, burst into the room. Malik, look what Mom got me. He barely had time to brace himself before she flopped onto the bed beside him, her wrist extended proudly. A silver charm bracelet gleamed under the sunlight streaming through the window. The tiny charms dangled as she waved her hand, the heart, the star, the little book, the bracelet, the one he had tried to buy for her. His chest tightened. You like it? He asked, his voice quiet. Lena beamed. Are you kidding? It's perfect. Then she frowned, tilting her head. But I thought you were going to get it. Malik hesitated. His mom must have gone back to buy it for him. He hadn't even thought about returning to that store. The idea of stepping through those doors again, of seeing those same people, the customers, the employees, the security cameras, made his stomach turn. I picked it out, he said finally, forcing a small smile. That's what matters, right? Lena grinned. Right! She threw her arms around his neck in a quick hug before bounding out of the room, already excited to show their mom again. Malik watched her go, his chest feeling tight. Not with anger, not with fear, with something else, something that felt like a slow, cautious kind of relief. He leaned back against the pillows, staring at the bracelet still shimmering in the light. Maybe it wasn't a perfect ending. Maybe there never would be one. But today was enough. And that was worth something.